and constitutional. So this is derived from the African Charter on Human and People's Rights that talks about a cultural democracy and reviews different country situations. So it reviews different country situations. It has case studies where countries are able to explain to you the situation that's pertaining in those countries, and then find threads in terms of what have they succeeded or not succeeded in doing in terms of bringing attention and response to their country situations. So or would like any further information about using the app, please feel free to see me. I'm happy to walk you through it, anything that you might want me to help with. Yesterday, our colleagues from Sudan made an announcement requesting whether we could assist with signing onto an open letter to the African Union, requesting a response to the situation pertaining in Sudan. I shared that on email. If you did not receive my emails last night, it probably means that I am unable to decipher your handwriting, and I ask you to please go to the registration desk and write out your email a little bit more clearly. Make app for registration as well. I'll definitely look for one. I don't know if one exists. So please, if you didn't get my emails from last night, please do go to the registration desk and write out your email a little more clearly. The colleagues from Burundi have also sent me a petition which they would like us to all sign up to, and I will be sharing that within the course of the day. Around 3 p.m. today, we'll be having a press conference, and a number of you, I will be approaching a number of you in terms of representation to please take part in the press conference. Just because it will be difficult to have everybody there. But if you're interested in being part of the press conference, please all. Yes, what have I left out? I think I have covered just about everything. If anything, I will continue with the announcements later. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite Apollos Nwafor as the moderator for this session to please come up and take over from me. So could we please have Samuel Wanjiko, Esther Waweru, Diana Gishengo, and Felix Lore? Could you please come up to the podium? I'm worried because I don't see anyone standing. Okay. You should also eradication of statelessness in Africa by email from me. And I think Diana will be referring to that protocol during her presentation.
I'll just do an introduction. All right. Morning, everyone. I guess we actually have been discussions are quite interesting, and like Acheng said, this afternoon there's going to be a press conference. So we're hoping that we'll be able to send out very clear messages to our governments, to other stakeholders, to development partners. And I think linked to the theme for this year, this session will help us rethink and relook at nationality and statelessness from a human rights perspective. I think I'm hoping actually that because I'm not an expert on this issue, so I'm hoping that the panel will be able to do justice to this within the limits of our time. Like Acheng said yesterday on the rights to nationality and the eradication of statelessness in Africa. And that protocol is actually building on and encapsulated within the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. If you look at the protocol, it sort of provides much more details as to how member states should behave regarding the right to nationality and dealing with stateless persons. But the protocol is actually aimed at eradicating statelessness. Yeah, so it's not just about protecting stateless people, but it's also about eradicating them. I think if I get the numbers correct, we have about more than half a, and what that means is that if you're stateless, then you are an orphan, and you don't have any legal right to claim social services, in a particular state. And wherever you stay, you're treated as an illegal immigrant or an alien who has entered that country unlawfully. And it means that you don't have any rights, so whatever, so to speak. At least that's what it looks like at face value. And you're vulnerable to any form of attack. And of course, the government of that particular country where you are staying will not be obliged to account. A lot of people are stateless and have their nationalities undetermined, not because they want to, but because of certain circumstances, probably conflicts. It could also be issues around the fact that some of them were born as refugees. So they were born as stateless people, and it's been quite difficult for them to actually achieve statehood. So I will then at this point begin to ask all our panelists to speak for about 7 minutes each maximum. Yeah, they are laughing. Yeah, 7 minutes each, and then we'll talk, and then we'll then have further discussions. Don't worry, minutes. And then I would like us to discuss all this in the light of the theme for this year, which is around refugees, returnees, and forced displacement. Finding durable solutions to that challenge. So I'm going to start to my right, my far right. Yeah? Yes, please. Okay, that's fine. No worries. Okay.
Can I stand there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay.
And I think there's a mic there, is there? Right. And please tell us if you're a stateless person before you start.
I start there. Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name's Samuel. I'm not a stateless person, but I am here representing the stateless people from my country. I come from Kenya, as I've said, and I'm a member of County Assembly. And the ward that I represent has stateless people. And I'm here to represent them and to talk on their behalf. And as the facilitator has rightly put it, that the people who are stateless, they are really, really suffering. And the fact that I'm the one here and not the Shona community that I'm representing already is a point that actually the stateless people, even in our country, they cannot even be able to travel out that can help them to do that. And that's why I am here to represent the Shona community that originally comes from Zimbabwe, but right now they are in Kenya from 1960s. They came into our country, and up to date, they have not been recognized as citizens in Kenya. And in my ward in particular, there are more than 3,000 of them. And I have grown up with them. I have lived with them since childhood. And I have seen the sufferings that these people are going through. And today, as I stand here, actually, I'm so much encouraged by what the civil societies are doing, and make sure that these stateless people in our country, they get citizenship and they get nationality so that they can also be able to enjoy all the services that they are not enjoying right now. So in particular, I'm going to talk about the stateless community in my country, Kenya, and in particular, the Shona community. As I say, they came from Zimbabwe in 1960s. And when they came into our country, since then, they have not been recognized as Kenyans. Most of them have died in the country, still stateless. Others have been born and raised in this country, Kenya, and still they have not attained citizenship. And lack of identity card. And in Kenya, if you lack the identity card, you suffer a lot. Because actually, you can't do much without an identity card. They are restricted to remain within a certain area, because when you move out of that area, and maybe the police get you and they ask you to identify yourself and you lack the identity card, then you end up in jail. So eventually they end up remaining within a small area, and in particular within the ward that I represent. These people cannot move out, not only out of the country, but even out of the county that they are in. So they suffer quite a lot. They also lack, right now in Kenya, every child who is joining primary school is required to actually produce a birth certificate, and the parents should produce their identity cards. And so what is happening, the Shona community, they are not able to access education. But previously, they were able to access only the basic education because the birth certificate was not vital. The other thing the Shona community are suffering from is that they cannot even do transactions. They cannot do any bank transaction. In Kenya, we have the mobile platform transaction called M-Pesa, which is very common. But these people cannot do it, cannot a SIM card, or they cannot register a card to have a phone. So what they do, they use Kenyans who are legitimate Kenyans to register a line, and then they give them to use. But they cannot send money or receive money. If they have to, they use a proxy who will eventually maybe charge them. So they lack even that privacy, because some of these transactions may not need to engage everyone. They are really suffering. And poverty has also been a major challenge these people are going through. Because of the above examples I've given, they end up living in abject poverty. Most of them, they end up just with the women. Normally men are good in carpentry, but you realize they cannot even access the market simply because they lack identification that they are Kenyans. And so there is need to recognize these people. There is need to give them the identification and to make them actually citizens of this country. Moving forward, we are really encouraged by what has happened in the recent time. We have one of the community that has suffered similarly, like the Shona community, from the coastal region in our country, but through the effort of the civil society, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Haki Center, and the others, they were able to acquire citizenship, and right now they are Kenyans. So we feel a lot of encouragement that we are moving in the right direction. And the same thing that happened to that community can also happen to the Shona community. So that's one of the greatest inspiration that we are having in order to achieve our goal to have the Shona community also recognized as Kenyans. And so from there, we have started a movement, or we have come up with a strategy to also make sure the Shona community become recognized in our country. What I have done as a member of county assembly from that area that they live in, we have been able to start profiling for them. And Kenya Human Rights Commission is really helped put a petition in the county assembly to have the county assembly also endorse and accept these people, because actually it has to start from the county assembly level. And then we have planned to even have a sitting with all the stakeholders, and that is starting with our governor of the county. We have introduced these people to the governor, and now by the end of this month we will be having a stakeholders meeting so that we can have these people formally recognized. And then lastly, we want now to go all the way to see our president, because without political goodwill, at times it becomes very hard. So we believe when we do all this, our president, we are going to achieve this. We have a lot of high hopes in this, that the Shona community soon also will be recognized as Kenyans. And as I wind up, you know, it is known all over the world, we have like 10 million people who are stateless. And if we combine efforts and we do what we can from our areas and from what we can be able to do from our respective countries, I believe we are going to achieve this. Actually, the UNHCR have set the all the Africans living within this continent, they are going to have their citizenship and recognized as citizens of the countries that they are in. I believe that one is achievable, and we are going to work together to make sure we achieve that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. So we're seeing that we can learn from the example of the community at the coast, but we can also see that it requires internal advocacy from those of us who hold political positions to make this happen. I would welcome Esther. Thank you for keeping to time.
Good morning, fellow citizens of Africa. How are you? My name is Esther Wawero. I work with Equality Now as a legal advisor. And allow me please to wear that Pan-African hat, because I realize inadvertently that this panel is very Kenyanese. By default, we didn't realize it until now, but trust me, I will try and paint, as will Diana, the African context. So what I want to speak about is the gender dynamics of discrimination when it comes to nationality laws. As we currently stand, have gender discriminatory laws when it comes to nationality rights. And you find that women particularly are not able to confer citizenship to their foreign spouses, for instance, or even to children born from a spouse. We still have, which I'll talk about, which are positive, but we still from the International African Charter as well. However, laws, we have countries, human right on the African absence thereof, but in actual practice. Particularly, the issue around dual nationality is almost forbidden in most countries, and women therefore suffer disproportionately. Situations where, particularly the African Commission, is not sufficient to allow me to become a Kenyan citizen. And this is perpetuated across many African countries. The second thing is, if I want to change, to register, I have to produce either my father's ID, or if I'm married, my husband's ID. And the same continues even when I want to change my name, for instance, I have to give. But it continues to perpetuate the stereotypes around the sex discriminatory laws that I mentioned, where specifically laws do say that a woman cannot pass children or even their foreign spouses, and to retain their citizenship upon dissolution of marriage in those instances. Their children born of a foreign spouse, then those children are at a risk of being stateless. Secondly, where women who have married and are, so children are brought up in the absence of the presence of one parent. Particularly with regards to the rights of children, over and above that they need to have a nationality, particularly in public schools. Even where they're able to access education, it's more often than not in private schools where the fees are very hefty. And sometimes you can, there's always the fear of being bullied and not belonging in that particular space. When it comes to the issue of acquiring citizenship by marriage, we see this as being particularly disadvantageous to women, because most women are forced to get into forced marriage or early marriages so that they can get a citizenship or a nationality. And this, of course, goes. They actually have different applications of the age, what they call full age of 18, where they want to terminate that marriage or get to claim custody or child access to their children, where the marriages break up because of the whole issue of male guardianship. So have citizenship, are not able to effectively access socioeconomic services. So whether it's access to hospitals on their lives and property in your name, effect, or even means in terms of consequences, status as equal, and also at the sub-regional level. So within ECOWAS, for instance, you have the Abidjan Declaration, you have the SADC resolution. African level. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I mean, it's quite interesting to see that even within the context of the protocol, that there are still gaps, gender-related gaps, especially with the fact that, you know, certain women cannot confer nationalities on their children or on their husbands. And it's evidence of.
I take the floor once again, this time to speak about issues of nationality. Why? Because we only engage in regional, sub-regional and international mechanism most of the time because we are citizens of a state. So whereas we can give our various identities, that legal identity is drawn largely from the state, and therefore nationality is the link between an individual and a state. When you lack that particular bond and connection, then you're a stateless person. That means no state recognizes as one of their own. And cases of people from various countries, notably Mauritania, Kenya, Botswana, Zambia, and so on, of people who are facing serious challenges in accessing their human rights because they lacked nationality. As a result, the African Commission became very innovative in are actually stateless. How, what's like the major cause of statelessness in Africa? One, if you all look at the map of Africa, compare it to the other maps of the world, we have the straightest borders. They are lines. Somebody sat down, drew lines, decided this is Mali, this is Burkina Faso, this is Libya, and so on. So if you look at communities, they cross over to the borders. But the laws on nationality and how you belong to that particular continent, into that particular country, do not apply to your family on the other side. So the history of colonialism, colonial laws is a major factor. Africa is also one of the countries with some very protracted conflict and lots of migration. So as a result of conflict, we have very many people who are long-term refugees. And by long-term, I mean refugees who've been in a country between 20 to 60 years. Children have been born, so they no longer have a connection to what was their country of origin. Then the other cause that applies especially to Eritrea, Sudan and South Sudan is the breakup of states. As they do that, the determination of who belongs where is left somewhere in the cracks. But there are also administrative causes because very few of Africans, like I said earlier, have the right documents. Based on this background, the African Commission undertook a study that was adopted, and they made a number of resolutions, including a resolution to make recommendation to the African Union to draft a protocol. Their advocacy, together with National Human Rights Institutes and civil society, was successful. And in 2016, the African Union Commission okayed the drafting of the African Union Protocol on the right to a nationality and eradication of statelessness. I did share the draft protocol. It is a draft protocol that so far has been adopted by the Specialized Technical Committee on Immigration. It awaits further discussion and hopefully adoption by the Specialized Technical Committee on Legal Affairs, After that, then it will go for adoption. What is the content of this particular protocol? So if you look at the preamble, it speaks to who we are as Africans, it speaks to our challenges, and why we need to connect and become innovative beyond the international instruments that touch on nationality and statelessness. Why? Because we have our own unique problems. So it's a document that is offering African solution. The objectives are threefold. The first one is respect for the right to a nationality in Africa. Why? Because in the human rights discourse, the right to a nationality is the mother of all rights. The state has the biggest obligation in matters human rights. If you do not, therefore, have a link to the state, then your access to human rights and other related services do not exist. It also establishes obligations and responsibilities of states on nationality in Africa. Then the third objective is to make sure that statelessness is eradicated in Africa. Having said that, I'd like to speak to just some of the innovations that I personally like about the draft protocol. Firstly, it expands the definition of statelessness from the internationally known definition. And it states that you're a stateless person if you're not recognized by any state or and if your nationality cannot be determined. So if there is a doubt as to your nationality, then you're also regarded as stateless, and stateless should not be a permanent situation. Then states should move very fast to resolve that particular situation. It also puts in place very innovative ways of addressing nationality at birth. There are two main ways of acquiring nationality. Either the nationality of origin or an acquired nationality. The nationality of origin is attributed, it is automatic, and it is never lost. But citizenship or nationality by registration can be lost. So it expands what nationality of origin is, and it covers children who are found on the territory and who, based on the laws, whether some of the countries, especially the common law system, provide that you're a national of origin if at least one of your parents was a national at birth. Okay? So that's the common law. The civil law system is slightly different. But there are lots of children who fall in between the cracks of different laws. So this protocol provides, if you're in such a situation, then you get nationality by attribution, which then is automatic and can never be lost. There are also laws, like Esther has indicated, where if you're born to foreign parents, then you do not acquire the nationality of the place where you're born, and sometimes you can parents belong as well. So it also covers that, broadens in a way, because if we address statelessness, childhood statelessness, then we'll have gone a long way in reducing and preventing future occurrences of statelessness. Example of Kenya, who have a beautiful clause in our law on how to stateless people. But for us to recognize a stateless person, they need to have been lawfully resident in Kenya since 1963. Remember, a stateless person has no documents. Therefore, there is no way that these stateless people will ever show they have been lawfully resident in Kenya since the point when we got independence. So the protocol then proposes, urges states to consider to take up habitual residence. Okay? So from the example of Kenya, it is lawful residence that is required, and it is continuous. So if you moved to Tanzania briefly, you no longer are considered stateless per Kenyan law. So the proposal for habitual does away with the fact that states would require lawful residents and continuous and sometimes perpetual residents. Because if you've been in a place for 20, 30, 40 years, surely you know where you belong. And most of the stateless people know where they belong. They have just been denied the legal connection to belong where they actually belong. It also has an innovation because Africa has lots of pastoralist community. Northern Africa, the Falatas, the Maasais, everybody. So they do recognize that we have border population and urge states where border population and nomadic population go across several territories to come together and discuss and ensure that there is a solution to that. On the, what's the name? There's this triangle that covers Uganda, South Sudan, and Kenya. And there are pastoralists there. I know the Kenyan side, they will never take an identity document because it will restrict their movements with their livestock to the other countries in search of pasture. So those people are at very high risk of statelessness, but this particular innovation in the protocol is very, very helpful. There is also the provision for not only dual nationality, but multiple nationality. Again, it is recognizing who we are as Africans. If my mother is from Burkina Faso, my father is from Zambia, and we live in Sudan, I can be all that. Okay? So it's also very helpful in that political.
Very interesting. You know, I remember a few years ago when we were discussing issues around nationality, there was a question of, you know, the economic and financial implications for dual nationality, dodging tax. Where do you all that? If you have like 3 different nationalities.
As Diana has put it, you realize that we are in boundaries that were like imposed onto us. Initially, we did not have the boundaries with us. We were living in villages which were well known. So when I go back again to Mr. Kimani's discussion was that you hear an example of the Shona community who are living in Kenya and are to be determined whether you lived or not. Why am I saying that? If you were born and there was no document to prove that you were given birth to, you lived, you had no document, and then you died, there was no document like a death certificate, 2 or 3 years later, nobody can attest that you are alive by that particular time when you are living. So all said and done, there are a lot of solutions that maybe I'll be able to share out with you that we have been able to do and can be done like a mere formality, while in other areas it will be done very strictly with the lens of the security. So again, the nationality in most of the countries we realize is pegged on security issues. So it becomes a lot of an issue of the national security, and when it is put at that particular perspective, then it means a lot of people might be discriminated. For instance, those who are of the Muslim origin or Muslim always face that particular the challenge of acquiring requirements are pegged onto that. For you to acquire, for instance, the hospital fund in Kenya again, you need all the registration documents. With all of that, I say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Felix. I'm sure we've heard very interesting perspectives. You know, from the political angle, then from the gender perspectives, from the legal perspective around the protocol of the African Union, and then more grounded now in the case study of how people, you know, how stateless people are treated and all that. And, you know, just to give us a much more deeper perspectives, if you're a stateless person, then you definitely are, by law, it's also similar to the discussion on what comes before. Is it the politics or the law, or is it the law that comes first before the politics? So I would ask us, if we do have questions, Declaration of Human Rights, you have the right to life. And if you have the right to life, we just have, sorry? Yes. So there are questions on the app, so we will look. If you've raised your questions on the app, that's fine. But if you do want,
and that way, when that point comes, there is mass adoption, ratification, and hopefully subsequently implementation coupled with domestication. So I just needed to add that.
So maybe I can read out the questions so far.
great.
Okay.
Are there?
Yes.
Okay. I went to primary school when there was no app, so here's how I would ask you to do it. If you want to, let's. Do you have them, Felix?
Okay. How the stateless people in Kenya run their daily life without identity card. What is that CS in Kenya doing to change the status quo? At Samuel, as a member of the county assembly and someone who has lived, grown with the Shona community, and also their representative, what are you doing in pushing for their recognition at the county assembly? To all panelists, it is quite interesting to know the situation of stateless persons in Kenya as a citizen of that country. What can we do better to help them? We can.
Okay.
Just a moment. Okay. To produce identity documents, the draft protocol must consider a clear provision for access to services for stateless persons as they process their registration.
Okay.
In Tanzania, the issue of nationality is currently used as a weapon to silence human rights activists and politicians who challenge human rights violations. Passports are confiscated and denied the right to travel, and people are denied the right to travel. How are we showing solidarity on this? To Esther and Diana, yes. What can we do about LGBT from Uganda and Tanzania who seek asylum in Kenya and cannot even get services? Some have given birth, therefore making their children stateless. If the Shona community is in Kenya from the 70s, how about their children? Are they considered Kenyans? Then all these years you have stayed without going to court at national and regional courts. What are some of the causes of statelessness, and why are the issues of stateless people not well documented in Africa? Pastoralists in Liliondo are most of the time questioned of their share origins and tribal clans. I am among the people who very often...
Okay, now we will take questions from the floor if they are different from what is on the app. Okay? So if they're the same...
I think how do the Shona children get their education?
So just to reconfirm, can I see your hands on this table? Okay. So it's the entire... Okay, right, fine. So you have just 10 seconds each to raise your questions. Go beat around.
I have it.
Yeah? The headset. Rather. Are you guys okay? Okay.
To travel with the children, so you need to have the authorization. So this is an issue. It's a concern. Don't you think that it's a discrimination against women? Because you have already divorced and the husband was the responsible person, but he doesn't have the responsibility of the children. So what can we do in this regard as the African Union? What can we do on this issue? Because women are discriminated because I don't have the right on my children. So if the children are less than 18 years old, I cannot travel with them. So I need to have the husband beside, but the husband is already gone. So what are the provisions when it comes to this issue? Because it is a serious issue for women. Thank you. Oui, merci. Juste quelques questions.
Important one. 10 seconds.
Okay, the issue of, I don't know how the protocol is addressing the problem of those people who are bordering areas and they share clans from one country to another, because this has been a problem in Tanzania in all our borders. When you have a clan or a tribe in one part of the country that also have you have the same tribe in the other part of the country, then they've been hunted. Most of the time, issues of nationality have been questioned. I don't know how this protocol is addressing that. And also the issue of using nationality to challenge human rights defenders whenever they stand on issues. I don't know how this protocol has been addressing that issue.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Next, please.
Thank you. My name is Jebra from Tanzania. But my question is, if someone is questioned his or her nationality, at what time will you consider him or her as a stateless? Because some people can take years, your nationality is still hanging. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to make reference to what Felix said, and there was another speaker who made reference to right to life. To ask whether in the work there's been reference made to the general comment number 3, which was produced looking at Article 3 of the African Charter, looking at what right to life means, and this was produced by the Working Group on the Death Penalty. And the focus is on dignified life. So it's not just life, it's dignified life, which would naturally then speak to the ability to enjoy economic and social rights, because that could also be one angle to use.
Great, thanks. Okay, next, is there any other? Okay, this way. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Abeti Sande. I'm from South Sudan. Our issue is the same like what my brother has raised. In South Sudan, all of us are South Sudanese, but in some tribes, it's very difficult for the government to issue for them a passport. For example, I'm from Eastern Equatoria, and particularly they will ask you to come with chief, with everything, and they know Nimule is in South Sudan. How will the protocol address this? It is not only from Eastern Equatoria, but Kakwa and Acholi the same. This is one. And then the second part of it also is very difficult for you, as my sister has mentioned. For you to travel with your child is very difficult. Now we are in a critical situation. South Sudan is in conflict. And some people are in Uganda, in Kenya, in Sudan. So when your child is sitting for Sudan School Certificate or P8, Permanent Living Certificate, they will ask you to go and come with the father. At this time, the father is in the refugee camps. That is also denying a child to go ahead with her education. What is the protocol addressing about this issue? Thank you.
Right, next please.
Thank you so much. My experience with, I'm Camelia from Sudan, and we had a problem after the secession of South Sudan, where the other citizens, like the Nubas, and the people from South Blue Nile, and people from African Darfurians, they had this very big problem because when they want to issue, they want to obtain their certificate, they have been asked several times and a lot of questions have been asked, and you also have to bring someone to come and prove that you are a Sudanese, you are not a South Sudanese. And also, especially for the Christians, because of the names are similar, especially those who are Christians. So this is also how it is something happened, but how can we address it in the protocol? Also, when addressing this issue of citizenship by marriage, I think we need to consider also the culture. Like in my country, we don't call our names after our husbands, but our names are after our parents, which is a bit better because even if I got divorced, I still maintain my nationality. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. So we're going to take just 3 more. Just 3 more. I think there's someone at the back, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And is that the last question, or is there any other hand?
It's just a comment.
Okay. Okay, there's two more. So after that, two more, and then, sorry, we'll have to ask you to listen, and then if you have more questions, please type them in the app.
Okay. Hey, everyone. I just want to give an experience of what it means for a refugee to be stateless and not have a nationality. I've lived in a refugee camp for 19 years in Uganda, and I had families who were also living in Kenya, and there were others who had to apply for asylum to go to a third country, like maybe Canada or USA, because of the difficulties in the refugee camps in African countries. Why am I saying this? I think we have had this conversation, but the refugees and the IDPs and displaced people have not been in the center of this conversation. Being a refugee for 19 years, I have learned that when you are stateless and you don't have nationality, there are so many services that you don't enjoy. I had like family members, friends, and even myself who would perform exceptionally good in school, but you don't have the access to join university because the government cannot give you, the host government cannot give you scholarship to go to university because you are not having a nationality. You're not a national of that country. So maybe it could be a charity organization that would give you scholarship, and they're very limited numbers of scholarships that refugees can access. So that means many refugees couldn't go to higher education. They couldn't access education at university level because they are just refugees, and there are no policies in place to make sure that they, refugees, have access. Uganda and Kenya have, I think, the most strictest rules in terms of how refugees are treated. In Kenya, if you're a refugee, you are confined in a particular area, and for you to come to Nairobi, you need to get an authorization. If you come to Nairobi, that authorization, and you get into contact with the police, you don't have that authorization, you're put to jail.
So I would ask to how when their issue would be addressed and be reintegrated in Kenya as a citizenship and given them citizenship.
Okay, thank you. And finally?
Oh, sorry, there's one more came in. What is the impact of statelessness to political participation and representation? And then quick question. For lesbian, bisexual, and queer refugee women seeking asylum in other countries and have kids, but maybe got children through artificial means and can't trace the donor of the sperm, what happens to them if they are actually asked to trace the child's father before traveling, which maybe puts them at more risk?
Right. Diana, that sounds like your question. Okay. All right. So we're going to give the panelists to respond. I'm going to still ask, the politician to respond first, if you don't mind. It's not easy to be a politician, so we envy you.
Thank you. Just from here, it's okay. Yes. Thank you very much. Even for the questions that have come, and I'm going to go straight to the questions because of the interest of time. There was this question on how do the Shona community make a livelihood without nationality, without identity card in Kenya. Actually, as I had said, they really suffer. They end up doing low standard jobs, casual work. They end up doing trading. Some of them sell charcoal. Others, they make carpenter furniture, and they sell at a lower rate, so that they can attract customers. We work, and then they have not been paid their wages. So they are really suffering, and somehow they still survive. The other question is, what is the MCA or the Member of County Assembly doing in the assembly to make sure that the county assembly. First, I have started him some presentation, even some songs in our local language. So he was very surprised that these people are they are more Kenyans than Zimbabweans, with the way the governor is very positive on that. I have also engaged our member of parliament,
but rather the system somehow makes them stateless. Again, we would equate them to the case of the question which was asked about the Sudan and South Sudan. In each and every country, we know that there are those superior communities that when they go to apply for nationality documents, right side of the politics, so they approve each time and then. So I think one of the questions that we need to
Burundi about highlighting the issue in Congo. And Congo is actually one of the countries, I didn't mention it, but it's one of the countries that still has unequal laws when it comes to transference of nationality. But there is some glimpse of light there, because DRC has ratified the Maputo Protocol, which provides for non-discrimination with the child. Unfortunately, South Sudan has not ratified the protocol, so the Maputo Protocol, so they cannot use that. We do as citizens is to talk about the coalition, the African Coalition on the Right to Nationality, which I think Diana, myself, Passing, Open Society are members of, and to extend an invitation.
Yes, I know you have a mic by you.
Is a major challenge, in addition to all the other challenges of long-term migrant, conflict of laws, and the political interest. But yes, the protocol does address that. Maybe we were just not loud enough, but thank you. You have lived that experience. That's very helpful. The other question is a question of border communities. So the protocol a state will go about the administrative procedures, but it does provide the broad guidelines to ensure that border communities do not continue suffering. On the question of whether there is reference to the general comment on the right to life, and in particular to live a dignified life, yes, it does, and you can find that in the preamble. Stateless people are not taught every day, so their life is not one of dignity, and that is well addressed there. Then on interim measures for stateless persons before they acquire nationality, the protocol does provide that states should provide mechanisms of determining who is stateless, measures protection of human rights and access to all services. In Africa, so found in that country. Because you realize, I think, and that, so it's a very vague to address. It does recommend to you in civil and nationality at then every situation that is still citizens conceive, or whether you do not know the ultimate guardian.
No.
Hello. Thank you very much. We're way past a bit longer than I expected, but I thought it was an interesting panel. So thank you, panelists. Thank you.